Good afternoon, Flagler County. I'm Crystal DeWind, and we are sitting here with Ray Stevens, who is running for one of the three remaining Palm Coast City Council seats. And we're going to be talking about some of the bigger issues that are happening in Palm Coast and what you would bring to the table if the city decided to elect you. So thank you for taking the time to come and sit here with me.
My pleasure.
We're going to start with some of the basic ones. Just if you can give us a brief overview of, what is the background and experience you're going to bring to Palm Coast should the people elect you? How is that experience going to help the city move forward in a more efficient manner?
Okay. Well, my family and I have lived here in Palm Coast for a little over 20 years. My wife is a nurse. She works at Advent Health. Prior to that, she worked at the Department of Health in Bunnell for many years. My daughter went through the school system here, public school system here, and played softball at Little League. I coached Little League softball, and as a result, we've established roots in the community. I'm a retired police lieutenant from New York. My final assignment before retiring from New York was as administrative lieutenant, and my responsibilities included, but were not limited to, personnel management, development of traffic facilitation plans, problem intersection assessment, records, communications, and special events planning, and a host of other administrative duties. And subsequent to that, I retired and I was a deputy sheriff in Pinellas County. I was also a adjunct professor at Kaiser College. I taught criminal justice. And I believe that the combination of the extent of time that we've lived here, plus my administrative background, because after all, the city council is an administrative body. I think I bring that experience to the table.
Okay. Where did the desire to run for city council come from exactly?
Well, all you have to do is look around. I wasn't happy. I'm not happy with the direction the city is headed. I ran for sheriff in 2012. I lost by 500 votes. So it was a fairly close election. So subsequent to that, I decided to take a seat on the bench, if you will, to use a baseball analogy. But you can sit on the bench so long and criticize what's going on, but if you want to make change, you got to get up off the bench and get in the game. So that's what I decided to do. And as you asked me why, it's because I believe that, as many people believe, that this shall we say, uncontrolled and or poorly planned development is taking a serious toll on our infrastructure, to include water, sewer, highways, roadways, flooding, drainage, air pollution, et cetera, et cetera. We now have been ordered by the state to build a new sewer plant. We only had 3 water plants, water treatment plants, and they are, once they reach 80% capacity, have to either be redone or we have to build another one. So this tremendous increase in population is taking a toll, not only environmentally, but also economically, because the taxpayers are paying for the improvements.
Okay. So you've kind of touched on a few of the subjects, the hot topic subjects, so to speak, that we plan to ask you about. Let's start with the traffic, since that was one of the first things that you mentioned in your experience, and that seems to be one of the large complaints here in Palm Coast is the ever increasing traffic and the lack of larger roads to accommodate all of that traffic. So if the people elected you, what are some of the plans that you would be trying to bring to the table to help combat the traffic versus our road infrastructure as it stands?
Okay, first, that's a lot to unfold here, unpack. But one has to keep in mind that Palm Coast was was not designed, was primarily designed to be somewhat of a retirement community with the amenities that go with that: pool, swimming pools, baseball fields, tennis courts, uh, and so on. And the road system, it was designed to be more picturesque than functional. For example, there's only two east-west connectors: Route 100 and Palm Coast Parkway. Only one really north-south connector, two if you want to count 95, to connect the southern part of the city to the northern part of the city. And Route 1 is a little bit out of the game, if you will, because it's quite far west. But so, with that in mind, what they've done on Route 100 with all of the development that's going on in a little over a mile of the road between Belterre and Old Kings, with the BJ's, Miller's Ale House, steak place, chicken place supposedly going in, storage units, mini malls. Um, there's really not too much. That part of 100, that 1 mile, a little over a mile, which I just came that way. It took me 15 minutes to go from Seminole Woods Parkway to Belterre. So that's pretty much beyond repair. The only thing I would like to look into there is two things: the traffic light timing. Wow. I don't know. I sure would, if elected or once elected, I would like to sit down with whoever designed or whoever timed those traffic lights and find out what their rationale was, because it makes no sense. You can't have trip and time lights operating at the same time. It doesn't work. And the other thing is the intersection design, especially at Route 100 and Seminole Woods Boulevard. There's no right-hand turn lane heading east on 100 to get on Seminole Woods Boulevard. You have the gas station there, and you have the steak place is going to be there. And I see they fabricated a right-hand turn lane. Whether it's going to be long enough, I don't know, but that might help. But there is no right-hand turn lane going east on Route 100 coming from Seminole Woods Boulevard of any. There is one there, but it's not effective, and it's dangerous because the pavement markings are not pronounced, and people in that lane have a tendency to go straight ahead. If you're familiar with the intersection, and people in the middle lane going straight ahead, and the lanes meet, and there could be a collision, and there are a few. The other one is at 95 and 100, where there's an accident a week. The overpass. It's confusing which lane. People are always going the wrong way, and there's no acceleration lanes anywhere. So you asked me, these are the things I would look into. Palm Coast Parkway is another challenge in that there's so many crossroads, intersections, make left and make rights. You can't continue to add lanes. It's very costly. What needs to be done is scale back on the development, on the construction. Consider the ramifications it's going to have on traffic, on as I said earlier, on sewer, water, drainage. Because the more concrete you put down, cover up the soil, you're covering over recharge zones for the aquifer. You also the water has no place to go, so now it's not percolating down to the aquifer. It's overflow ends up in storm pipes and the intracoastal of the Atlantic. So my feeling is let's take a step back. Let's consider uh, all of the ramifications that we're going to encounter and some of the unintended consequences of this construction. And I think that needs to be addressed. That's going to be my priority, along with taxes. I don't believe that there should be, uh, as your city councilman, I would vote against any tax increase or any new tax uh, until and unless uh, every other cost-saving measure has been fully explored and exhausted. Then, maybe then, I would vote for a small tax increase. But I'd be looking, my philosophy is you got to live within your budget. We got to find ways to cut costs because it's easier to say, oh, well, we'll just raise taxes. But in my opinion, that should be the last resort, not the first response.
So, since we've touched on water and the wastewater plants a few times now, um, obviously in Florida, that's one of our most sacred resources. And we do need a third wastewater plant and potentially a fourth water plant at the same, that's something that I hear a lot of with the citizens. So, how do you plan to balance the need of those plants while still maintaining the not raising taxes?
Well, impact fees really haven't been adjusted. I think since 2000.
I know they adjusted them this
a
year.
little bit. They raised them a little bit, but really, the impact fees are don't come anywhere near covering the cost of what it costs to run uh, water and sewer. A case in point, south of Route 100 on Old Kings Road, there's a developer building a large housing development there, and the city they annex the property, and when they annex the property, it means the city has to supply water and sewer and a lift station because that area is lower than the pumps. So that's going to cost somewhere in the vicinity of $10 million. Are the impact fees going to cover that? Nowhere near it. So the residents now are paying for whoever moves in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a little lopsided. Now, how can you do it without raising taxes? Well, first of all, excuse me, if we were a little bit more conservative in our development, because what happens here in Palm Coastal, and I guess it must happen in a lot of other cities, is that there is constant rezoning, upzoning, spot zoning, which has thrown the scheme of things off. If you compare the original site plan, master plan that the ITT developed in the early 70s, and which was approved by the state of Florida, approved by the federal government, and overlay it on what we have now, you would recognize it because they keep. And there's wetlands involved here. Palm Coast was built primarily on wetlands. I mean, Cedar Swamp and wetlands. So I think what needs to be done is to just take, as I said, at the risk of being redundant, we've got to take a step back and slow down on the construction. Will that help pay for the a new sewer plant? Perhaps. I think raising the impact fees. I mean, not astronomically, but certainly a little bit more. Looking for ways that we can cut back on the existing budget, either through attrition, through consolidation of services, uh, and basically maybe we don't need all the equipment that we have, and also consider outsourcing, especially in the case of the swales. Now we're having a big storm headed this way. The drainage ditch at the end of my street hasn't been attended to in six years. It's gonna flood when we get a heavy rain. My property is like lakefront property. It's It's funny, but it's not if you live there. And they haven't maintained that because without maintaining the drainage ditches to flow into the water, freshwater canals, which in turn flow into the intracoastal, it's like a funnel. You have a narrow part on a funnel and a wide part on the top, liken it to the swales, and start pouring water in there. And if the water is not flowing freely through the narrow part, you're going to have a backup, a flood. And that's something that I will uh, attend to or see that it is attended to. And as I said, outsourcing might be the answer. Now, you have to do a cost analysis. I don't want to shoot from the hip, but you have to do a cost analysis to see if there is an organization or a company that can do the job as well or better than the existing uh, city personnel at or a lesser cost, because it's not being attended to now. Maybe they don't have enough people. I don't know. I'm not there yet, so I can only assume that they don't have enough people or the right equipment.
All right.
I can't elaborate on it any further than that at this point.
Okay. And talking about the budget, because that's always a topic. Every September, October, it's always a hot topic in Palm Coast. Um, what exactly are your concerns regarding the state of the city's budget, and do you feel that there really is a need for a forensic audit like so many of the residents are asking for?
The budget too high. 400. I guess they're up to 421 million. That's nearly $500 million budget. Uh, I think that we have to scale back. And what was the second part of your question? Oh,
the forensic audit. That's always been a huge ask from a lot of residents here.
The golf course lost $400,000, and everybody's scratching their heads trying to figure out where the money went, and rightfully so. But just because there's money missing doesn't mean that somebody stole it. You see, a forensic audit is like an investigation. You're looking for a criminal reason for the money disappearing when it could be just mismanaged. It could be an accounting error. First, I would exhaust the traditional audits, troubleshoot in this case with the golf course, see what they're spending their money on. Do they have too many golf carts? Can we do with less? Can we keep them longer? If you suspect criminal activity, then a forensic audit would be in order. But they're not cheap. I listened to the fellow at the city council meeting. I don't know. He's talking it could run be as little as 45,000 at 400,000, if I heard him right. Mm-hmm. And I think that should, on the back burner, let's use the traditional means first before we spend the money on a forensic audit.
Okay. Another topic that a lot of people always have questions about is the small business community here in Palm Coast. And a lot of small businesses feel like Palm Coast is not small business friendly. When it comes, whether it's they can't park their vehicles with signage on it in their driveways, the advertising rules, signage rules, the whole thing. With that in mind, if you're elected, what would you be fighting for that small business community here in Palm Coast?
Well, I would look into see by what mechanism we can reduce red tape in order to start up a business, the permitting process, the inspection process. I've heard from people that are attempting to open up a small business. It's an arduous procedure, and I think that could be abbreviated or shortened, made simpler. The other part concerning parking commercial vehicles in your driveway, I don't If it's just overnight, I would personally wouldn't have a problem with it, because that's their livelihood. But if you're going to leave it there and the grass starts growing around it and bird nests are being built on the windshield, that's no good. If it's a weekend, you come home from work, you park your truck, your pickup, or whatever. It has to be within reason, the size of the vehicle. I wouldn't have a problem with that, because if a small business owner has a truck and wants to advertise his or her business, uh, they need that truck to be visible, and so I wouldn't have a problem with that, with an overnight parking or weekend parking, not weeks at a time, definitely not.
Okay. So there's a handful of really hot topic items that have recently come to light. With one of them being in September, Pontieri brought up at the first evening business meeting the fact that one of the landowners for this westward expansion was supposed to be the one funding multiple extension roads as well as a junior Olympic sized pool with a stadium and ball fields, and this was all in the current DRIs that landowner is trying to replace. What are your thoughts about what she uncovered, and what would you do with that information if elected moving forward?
Well, first and foremost, I'm opposed to this so-called westward expansion, to benefit a few multi-millionaire developers. Let's attend to the east side of Route 1 first. We have major problems and challenges here. We don't have to go and go deeper into the bushes, if you will, and nearly double if the plans that I've seen, but nearly double the population of Palm Coast. And that's not going to come cheap. And the DRI specified that the developer had, and I think it was Rainier, had to put in all of the infrastructure, roads, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's my understanding, like I said, I'm not on the inside, but he's attempting to back out of that. And that doesn't work for me. So I think the point being is let's worry about the east side. Let's get that in shape, uh, and then we start to start spending money on the west side of Route 1. That's what my stand is.
Okay, so on the same subject, since that was uncovered, if you're elected, do you plan to work with Pontieri to see that all the DRIs and MPDs are gone over to make sure that developers are not skimping out on what they're supposed to be doing infrastructure wise for Palm Coast?
Well, yeah, I would, but I think I don't know whether that's directly the responsibility of the city council to be double checking every work permit or projects. I think that there are people that work for the city that should be doing that, and then we should be reviewing it. I think that's how the so-called chain of command should work. You know, so would I be interested in getting together with other council members to see that that's done? Yeah, of course. But like I said, it's just like making up a $421 million budget. That's not an individual city council person's responsibility. You have people in place for that. And then they present the budget to the city council, and in my opinion, the way they handle it, we should look to see where we could save money. See if if we're spending money where we don't really need to, or maybe we should spend some money where we're not spending money. It's all on prioritization and allocation of funds.
Okay. The last question I have is on the actual city manager. So we all know that Denise Bevins was let go earlier this year, and Ms. Johnston is the acting or interim city manager, and there is an ongoing process to look for candidates. what are some things you would like to see in a city manager if you're elected and you're going to be a part of this interview process?
Well, let me preface my remarks by saying I think that the way the city manager was fired was unprofessional. Chastised in private, and you praise in public. In this particular case, they should have had a personnel meeting with the city council and given her an opportunity to resign or be fired. And that should have been done behind closed doors and announced at a public meeting. I think that they embarrassed this woman to tears. It wasn't necessary. Now, what would I be looking for? Well, first and foremost, I'd be looking for a city manager that has management experience. And I don't mean over budgets, I mean over people. Because the higher up you go in an organization, I don't care what it is, public or private, the less technical skills you need and the more management skills you need. Because it's not your job to do the job, it's your job to get the job done. And that's handled through management skills, number one. Number two, I would like to see the candidate have experience managing a city. It doesn't have to be the same size, it could be bigger, it could be smaller. But once again, managing experience, and I'd like the city manager to be a people person, because dealing with people would be an integral part of the job. And a degree in municipal in municipal government would be preferable, and coupled with, as I said, if I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but with experience in doing a similar job.
And I know you just said that you felt it was very unprofessional the way Denise Bevins was fired, but do you feel that she was failing at her job enough to warrant the dismissal?
I can't speak to that because just like I can't speak to what I'm going to do, or what decisions I'm going to make about existing personnel, because I don't want to go into this job with any preconceived notions. I want to be able to evaluate the performance of the individual. And she didn't work for me, so I can't say she didn't do a good job. It's what you read in the papers and what people say. I don't know. I don't expect to manage based on what people say and what I read in the paper. It'll be on personal experience.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and answer some of these questions that the community at large has for all of the different candidates. Thank all of you for watching. You can find this video on our website, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.